Intro 3, 17 a.m., October 28th, 1941. The front line is 120 kilometers west of Moscow, near the frozen village of Volokholamsk. Lieutenant Franz Staudinger, a commander in the 4th Panzer Division, leans against the cold steel of his Panzer III. The air is so cold it burns the lungs. He is not looking for the enemy, he is staring at the earth. The offensive, Operation Typhoon, is dead. It was not stopped by the Red Army. It was stopped by the Rasputitsa, the time without roads. His 22-ton tank, an instrument of blitzkrieg that crushed France, is now a static steel box, its narrow 360mm tracks sunk to the axles in a bottomless freezing ocean of mud. The field reports flooding Army Group Center all say the same thing. Vehicles immobilized. Fuel consumption at 400%. Logistical collapse imminent. The German doctrine is built on speed, on hard-packed roads and dry fields. This is a different planet. The mud clings with the strength of concrete, and the sub-zero temperatures freeze it solid around the drive sprockets. Engines scream in protest, consuming precious fuel, only to dig their own graves deeper. Staudinger feels a cold, creeping dread that has nothing to do with enemy artillery. It is the fear of immobility, the fear of being a target. This entire strategy, the very concept of mechanized warfare, is failing. It is failing because of a fundamental miscalculation of physics. Ground pressure. The German armor is too heavy for its narrow footprint. It is designed for Europe, not for the vast, primitive emptiness of the Russian steppe. And as Staudinger strains his ears, listening to the wind cut across the flat expanse, he hears a new sound. It is not the high-pitched whine of a Panzer's Maybach engine. It is a low, guttural, metallic roar. It is the sound of something moving, something that is not supposed to be moving. Through the pre-dawn mist and falling snow, a shape emerges. It is low, angular, and uncannily fast. It doesn't plow through the mud, it seems to glide over it, throwing massive clumps of earth from tracks twice as wide as Staudinger's. This is the T-34. The Germans have seen them before, but in small numbers. Now they are appearing in droves. Staudinger's gunner frantically traverses the turret, firing the 50mm cannon. The shell sparks, whining off the T-34's sloped front plate. It doesn't penetrate. It doesn't even seem to slow it down. The Soviet tank, an impossibly crude machine by German standards, slides past their position, its own 76mm gun firing as it moves. A neighboring Panzer IV erupts in a flash of orange and black. The German crew is stunned into silence. Their weapons are useless, their tactics are useless, and their tanks are trapped. "What is that thing?" the loader whispers, his voice tight with disbelief. This machine ignores the mud, it ignores the cold, it ignores the fundamental laws of armored warfare as they understand them. What Staudinger and the entire German High Command didn't know was that this revolutionary weapon, this ghost in the mud, was the result of a dead Soviet engineer's defiance, built on a crazy idea rejected by the American military a decade earlier. The doctrine of armored warfare in the 1930s was a fragile hypothesis. It was built by men like Guderian in Germany and Fuller in Britain on the assumption of favorable terrain. The infrastructure of Western Europe, its dense road networks, firm fields, and mild climate, was the silent, uncredited partner in the success of blitzkrieg. The German tank designs reflect this. The Panzerkampfwagen III, the backbone of the assault on Russia, weighed 22. 7 tons. Its narrow 360 millimeter tracks exerted a ground pressure of approximately 1.05 kg/2. The heavier Panzer IV with 400 mm tracks was slightly better at 0.89 kg/2. These were road-bound machines, designed for exploitation and speed, not for elemental warfare. Official reports from the Heereswaffenamt, Army Ordnance Bureau, following the Polish and French campaigns, noted the vulnerability of mechanized units to degraded terrain. But these were filed as logistical concerns, not as fundamental design flaws. The operational assumption was that any mud would be temporary. Russia proved this assumption fatal. The Rasputitsa is not just mud, it is a geological event. In the autumn, relentless rains turn the rich Chernozem soil into a clinging, bottomless morass. In the spring, the thaw creates an inland sea. German intelligence, the Fremde Heere Ost, had maps of Russia's few paved roads, but it had no comprehension of what happened to the 90% of the country that was unpaved. The failure was total. Field reports from the 2nd Panzer Group become desperate. Our trucks, even the half-tracks, are immobilized. Fuel must be flown in. We are measuring advance in meters per day. German engineers scrambled to create track extensions, the Ostketten, but these were crude. Bolt-on solutions that often broke under the immense torque. The entire logistical chain, from the Opel Blitz trucks to the vital horse-drawn artillery, dissolved. Horses, unable to pull wagons through the knee-deep slime, dropped dead in their harnesses. The failure was not just tactical, it was mechanical and philosophical. The German war machine, a marvel of precise engineering, was being defeated by geography. A statistic, 1.05 kg/cm2, is sterile. It carries no emotional weight. The human consequence of that number is a 20-year-old Panzer grenadier, freezing to death in a ditch, his truck hopelessly mired 50 kilometers from the front. It is the tank crew, burning their last liters of fuel not to advance, but simply to run the engine, to generate enough heat to keep from freezing solid inside their own steel coffin. It is the pervasive, soul-crushing smell of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and frozen mud. The psychological impact was devastating. This was the all-conquering Wehrmacht, the masters of modern war, reduced to medieval levels of suffering. A diary entry from a soldier in the 9th Panzer Division reads, "We are no longer fighting the Russians, we are fighting the earth itself, and the earth is winning. My feet have not been dry in 6 weeks. We clean our rifles, and by morning, a new layer of frozen condensation has seized the bolts. There is no cover. There is only the mud and the wind." The High Command in Berlin looked at the maps. They listened to the meteorological forecasts. They reviewed the specifications of their own armor. The consensus was bleak. Sustained mechanized operations in this environment were not possible. The experts agreed. It simply couldn't be done. The solution to this 1941 nightmare begins not in a Soviet factory, but in a dusty New Jersey garage in 1921. It begins with John Walter Christie. Born in 1865, Christie is not a trained engineer. He is a force of nature, a brilliant, abrasive, pathologically stubborn inventor. He builds fire engines. He designs front-wheel drive taxi cabs. He is obsessed above all else with speed. When he sees the slow, lumbering tanks of World War I, he is reportedly disgusted. He envisions a new kind of armored vehicle, a cavalry tank, as fast and agile as a horse. To achieve this, He invents his masterpiece, the Christie suspension. It is a radical departure from the crude bogies and leaf springs of the era. His system features massive road wheels, each attached to a long vertical coil spring housed inside the tank's hull. This allows for an enormous independent range of motion. A tank with Christie's suspension doesn't just roll. It flexes. It absorbs shock. It can move at incredible speeds over rough terrain. His second idea is even stranger, a convertible drive. The tank can run on its tracks for cross-country travel, but in less than 30 minutes, the crew can remove the tracks and drive on the rubber-rimmed road wheels, hitting highway speeds. In 1928, Christie demonstrates his M1928 prototype to the U.S. Army Ordnance Bureau at Fort Meade. The officers are dumbfounded. The low-slung, alien-looking machine screams across the field at 42 miles per hour on its tracks. Then the crew removes them. On its wheels, it hits a terrifying 70 miles per hour. The army is appalled. The machine is loud, mechanically complex, and prone to throwing its tracks at high speed. It is presented by an arrogant civilian who openly mocks their horse and buggy thinking. A U.S. cavalry officer famously remarks, "Mr. Christie, this is a weapon of war, not a race car. It is impractical." The Army purchases a few prototypes, designates them T3E2, and promptly buries the project in bureaucratic committees. Christie, furious and demanding, makes enemies of everyone in the War Department. His crazy idea is rejected, but across the Atlantic someone is watching. The Soviet Union, desperate to modernize its backwards military, sees grainy films of Christie's prototypes. They do not see the flaws. They see the future. In 1930, using a front corporation and forged documents claiming the chassis are agricultural tractors, Soviet agents purchased two M1930 convertible tanks from Christie. They are shipped, disassembled, to the Kharkov Comintern Locomotive Plant, KHPZ, in Ukraine. A team of young Soviet engineers is tasked with reverse engineering the American tractors. Their leader is a quiet, intense, 40-year-old man named Mikhail Ilyich Koshkin. Koshkin is a pragmatic visionary. He immediately sees the genius in Christie's suspension. He also sees the absurdity of the convertible drive. In a country with almost no paved roads, why would you design a tank to drive on its wheels? He makes a fateful decision. He will keep the suspension, but abandon the convertible concept. He will create a new tank, one that runs only on tracks, and crucially, those tracks will be wide. We are now in Kharkov, 1938. The atmosphere in Koshkin's design bureau, KB24, is thick with paranoia and pressure. Marshal Tukhachevsky, the Red Army's foremost armored theorist, has just been executed in Stalin's Great Purge. Koshkin is working in the shadow of the NKVD. Failure does not mean a lost contract. It means a bullet or a trip to the Gulag. Koshkin's deputy, the brilliant and meticulous Alexander Morozov, helps him refine their new design. The GKO, the State Defense Committee, is backing a different prototype. The A-20, a light, fast tank that retains Christie's convertible drive. Koshkin is championing his own secret project, the A-32. The A-32 is heavier, it has thicker, radically sloped armor, and it has 500mm wide tracks. It is designed not for roads, but for the taiga and the steppe. It is a machine designed for Russia. The air in the KHPZ assembly hall is a fog of welding smoke, machine oil, and the bitter cold of the Ukrainian winter. Koshkin, a chain smoker who seems to live on black bread and stress, works 18-hour days. He is fighting a war against the bureaucracy, which sees his A-32 as too heavy and too slow. He knows he needs to prove them wrong, dramatically. In early 1940, Koshkin makes one of the most audacious gambles in military history. He receives permission to present his two A-32 prototypes, now designated T-34, to Stalin in Moscow. The committee assumes he will transport them by train. Koshkin decides in secret that he and his team will drive them, a 2,000-kilometer trek from Kharkov to Moscow, in the dead of winter, through snowdrifts, over frozen rivers, and across a landscape with no roads. It is a forbidden, insane, and brilliant test. The journey is a grueling nightmare. It is March 1940. The two prototypes set off in secrecy, painted in olive drab, their crews forbidden to speak to anyone. The cold is a physical enemy, dropping to 30 degrees below zero. The steel of the transmission becomes brittle and shatters. Koshkin, Morozov, and the small team of engineers work in the open, their bare hands freezing to the tools as they make repairs. They are mechanics, drivers, and conspirators, pushing their machines to the absolute limit. At one point, Koshkin himself wades into a half-frozen river to find a safe crossing point for his tanks, but the T-34s endure. This is the test the German Panzers would fail a year later. The Christie-derived suspension, robust and simple, absorbs the brutal frozen terrain. The wide 500mm tracks keep the 26-ton machines afloat on snow and ice that would have instantly swallowed any other tank in the world. The tanks are performing flawlessly. The design is proven. They arrive at the Kremlin's Ivanovskaya Square caked in ice, mud and filth, their engines still ticking. Stalin and the entire Politburo emerge from the building. They are speechless. They walk around the two monstrous machines which have just driven 2,000 kilometers in Arctic conditions. Stalin, impressed by the raw power and proven reliability, immediately approves the T-34 for mass production. This, he reportedly states, is a machine for the next war. It is a total victory for Koshkin, but it comes at a terrible cost. The brutal journey has ruined his health. That swim in the frozen river has given him severe pneumonia. He undergoes surgery but never recovers. Yunjait just start. Mikhail Koshkin dies on September 26, 1940 at T4. He has given his life for his machine. He will never see it in combat, never know that he has just forged the shield and sword of the Soviet Union. If stories of unsung genius and impossible engineering feats fascinate you, stay with us. The real test of Koshkin's machine was just beginning. The confrontation now shifts. Koshkin is gone. The T-34 is in production. The confrontation is now intellectual, happening in the shocked and panicked halls of the German High Command. It is late November 1941. Army Group Center headquarters near Smolensk. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of the Blitzkrieg, is addressing a special commission sent from Berlin. The commission includes ordnance engineers and weapons designers from the Heereswaffenamt. The mood is not professional. It is acrimonious. "My reports," Guderian says, his voice flat and cold, "are not alarmist. They are fact. The T-34 is, at this moment, the finest tank on the planet." An engineer from the firm Henschel shifts. "General Feldmarschall, with respect, our intelligence indicates the machine is crude. The welding is abysmal. The crew ergonomics are non-existent. The optics are inferior to our Zeiss lenses." Guderian's fist hits the map table. And what good are your perfect optics when your tank is stuck in the mud? What good is your comfortable crew compartment when a 76mm shell comes through your flat 50mm front plate? He paces, his fury barely contained. While you were debating transmission tolerances, they were solving the real problem: mobility. This Koshkin. He took the American Christie's high-speed suspension, married it to tracks wide enough to cross a swamp, and put a gun on it that defeats our armor. It is a pragmatic masterpiece. The men from Berlin are silent. They represent an engineering philosophy of perfection, of optimization. The T-34 is a challenge to their entire worldview. It is a brute force solution. And it is working. We are losing tank-on-tank engagements, Guderian presses. Our 37mm anti-tank gun is nicknamed the Door Knocker. Our short-barreled 50mm cannon on the Panzer III is ineffective outside of 300 meters. The T-34's sloped armor. It's not just thick, it's angled. It deflects our shots. An official from the War Office speaks. A response is already on the drawing board. The Panzer project. It will incorporate sloped armor and a long-barrel 75mm gun. Guderian laughs, a short, bitter sound. On the drawing board, the T-34 is 100 kilometers from Moscow. Send your designers to the front. Let them sit in a frozen Panzer III and then tell me about their drawing boards. We jump forward. July 1943, the Battle of Kursk. This is the real test. The Germans have learned. They have fielded their own answers to the T-34. The monstrous Tiger I, with its dreaded 88mm gun, and the new sophisticated Panther, a direct, if over-engineered, copy of the T-34's sloped armor and wide-track philosophy. The Germans have gathered their elite panzer divisions for one last great offensive, Operation Citadel. But the Soviets have not been idle. The KHPZ factory was lost, but its entire tooling, thousands of machines and workers, was put on trains and moved 200 kilometers east to the Ural Mountains. Factory No. 183 in Nizhny Tagil is now the largest tank factory in the world, an industrial miracle churning out T-34s 24 hours a day. A battalion from the 5th Guards Tank Army rumbles across the steppe near Prokhorovka. The air is an opaque wall of black smoke, high explosive dust, and the scream of Stuka dive bombers. A T-34-76, model 1943, crests a wheat-covered ridge. Its commander spots a platoon of German Panzer IVs, the new long-gunned variant. Target 800 meters, armor-piercing, fire! The 76mm F-34 gun barks, but the tank does not stop. It fires on the move. This is the hidden magic of the Christie suspension. It is so stable, the independent wheel travel so profound, that it provides a relatively smooth ride. The T-34 can fire with reasonable accuracy while advancing at 20 km/h. The German tanks, with their stiffer leaf spring bogies, must use stop-and-shoot tactics. They halt, aim, fire, and then move. In the seconds they are static, the T-34s are closing the distance. They swarm. They are crude. They are deafeningly loud, and their two-man turrets are inefficient. But they are fast, and they are many. They use their mobility as a form of armor, racing past the superior long-range guns of the Tigers, getting to point-blank range, where their own 76mm guns are lethal. They are not dueling weapons. They are hammers. Field reports from the Voronezh front are blunt. Losses are catastrophic, but for every tank we lose, We have two replacements. The enemy has none. We advance. By the end of the battle, the German offensive is broken, the Wehrmacht's Panzer arm is shattered, and it will never again mount a major strategic offensive on the Eastern Front. The immediate consequence of Kursk is the final validation of the T-34. The design is quickly upgraded. The T-34-85 is introduced, featuring a much larger three-man turret and a powerful 85mm cannon that can finally defeat the Tiger and Panther at range. This vehicle becomes the definitive tank of the Red Army's great counter-offensives, from Operation Bagration to the final Battle of Berlin. By 1945, over 84 00 T-34s of all variants have been built. It is, by a massive margin, the most produced tank of the Second World War. Its long-term effect is even more profound. The T-34's three-part formula, mobility, wide tracks, Christie suspension, angled armor, deflection, and a powerful gun, the F-34 and 85mm, becomes the template for the entire next generation of warfare. It effectively invents the main battle tank, MBT concept. Every successful tank for the next 30 years, from the Soviet T-54 to the American M48 Patton and the British Centurion, is a direct philosophical descendant of Koshkin's machine. The Christie suspension itself, in modified forms, becomes the standard for British cruiser tanks like the Crusader, Cromwell, and Comet. The crazy American idea, rejected at home, becomes the foundation of global armored doctrine. And what of the men? J. Walter Christie dies in 1944. He is broke, bitter, and still filing lawsuits against the US government. He never receives a dime in royalties from the Soviets and dies largely unaware that his invention, in the hands of a Soviet engineer, saved the world from fascism. Mikhail Koshkin is posthumously awarded the Stalin Prize, the highest honor in the Soviet Union. His legacy is not a monument, but the deafening roar of 84 Zu-0 engines. He is the quiet engineer who traded his life for a 2,000-kilometer test drive, and in doing so built the machine that won the war. The story of the T-34 is not just about sloped armor or wide tracks. It is a story about competing philosophies. The German engineers, in their pursuit of technical perfection, created magnificent, complex, and fragile predators like the Tiger and Panther. They built tanks for an ideal war. The Soviets, under Koshkin, built a tank for the real war. They built a tank to master their own environment. The mud, the snow, the cold, and the vast, crushing distances of their homeland. The T-34 was flawed. It was crude, uncomfortable, and often unreliable, but it worked. It worked when nothing else would. This principle echoes today. We see this same philosophy in the design of NASA's Mars rovers. The rocker bogie suspension system is its own kind of Christie-like solution, a design focused entirely on mastering a hostile, unknown terrain. We see it in the pragmatic, rugged design of disaster response vehicles, built not for comfort, but to operate in the chaos of an earthquake's rubble or a hurricane's floodwaters. Technology that ignores its environment is an exercise in arrogance. Technology that masters it changes the future. The T-34 proves that the best design is not always the most advanced, the most elegant, or the most comfortable. The best design is the one that solves the most fundamental problem. For the Wehrmacht in 1941, the problem was the mud. For the Red Army, the T-34 was the solution. The steel mills in the Urals, once the site of Koshkin's desperate gamble, are still forging armor today. The endless steppe, which once swallowed an entire German army, remains a silent witness to the power of a single revolutionary idea. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?